Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to be doing a review of the recently released Wonder Woman 1984. Now, I did see the original Wonder Woman. I do like that movie. I think it's fairly well put together. I like Patty Jenkins directing in that film, and she's coming back to do the directing for this film as well. So we'll see if she can kind of keep it together. But there's going to be spoilers in this. At least general spoilers, if not bigger ones. I'll try and steer clear of as much fluff as I can. Try to get to the point on a lot of these things. But basically, it's going to be kind of a recap of the film and maybe in some nitpicking here and there on certain things. Now, first up is the acting. And the acting in this film, you have obviously Gal Gadot and Chris Pine coming back to play their characters from the first movie. We'll go over that mindfuck later, by the way, because he blew up in a fucking plane in 1917 in the previous film. So the reason why he's back, we'll get to that later. Then you also have Pedro Pascal coming in as Maxwell Lord, who classic DC villain, businessman, that type of thing. And we also have Kristen Wiig coming in as Cheetah, and really she doesn't actually become the Cheetah character in physical form anyway until the very end of the movie. So she's more just kind of playing this very awkward sort of scientific chick that is suddenly hot. It's kind of like this movie is very 80s in certain ways, and it's supposed to take place in 1984, so that really does make sense. And this is going, I guess, a little bit more into the tone and the feel of the movie, where they splash 80s right in your face immediately. There is an 80s montage as soon as the fucking opening credits go on this thing, so you know exactly what decade you are living in, or this movie is taking place in. As for that, actually, it really doesn't add anything to the film to put it in 1984 other than placing it before the events of Justice League and Man of Steel and all that shit. Because really this story could have probably taken place for the most part at any point or time in the digital age. So from the 80s onward, it could have been taken place in the 90s, the 2000s, anything like that. Anything even up into modern day, it could have probably taken place then too. Which maybe would have been a little bit interesting because you're not kind of working in your own isolated bubble in that sense. But like I said, the setting of the 80s really doesn't do anything other than just, remove, because Steve Trevor is removed from the 1910s. So it's shell shock for him to be in that kind of world. Maybe they just didn't want it to go too far, like into the realm of cell phones and stuff. So that could have been it, or maybe there was some kind of other reason for it, but the story really doesn't hinge on it. It's just kind of, fluff and atmosphere. Then you go, after you get past, Kristen Wiig does a fairly good job as the Cheetah villain, even though she does get intimidating after a while. She does a good job, actually, through her character progression in the movie. She actually probably has the closest thing to a full character arc in the film, I would say. Gal Gadot and Pedro Pascal, the other two main characters, sort of have ones as well, even though they're kind of obvious ones. Where hers, she goes from the kind of mild-mannered scientist lady to hot girl to furry. So I don't know what you want to call that progression, but regardless, we get to that point eventually. But the problem really in this movie isn't the actors at all. They all do a fairly good job. Like I said, they all come back. Pedro Pascal's the only one that really kind of chews scenery near the end of the movie. He overplays his character quite a bit. He's very flamboyant as Maxwell Lord. He's not a very reserved businessman. He's very loud, screamy. I know there was a lot of people actually before this movie came out that were saying that or right when it came out, that were saying that he is a Trump allegory of some sort. He didn't really come off that much of a Trump allegory, maybe because of the hair, because the hair definitely kind of makes me think that a bit. And it doesn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, it doesn't really, ring true to me, other than the fact he's a businessman and he has some weird looking hair. Outside of that, it really doesn't, do anything too insane. At least not as a comparison. They don't do any kind of a meme thing where he's supposed to be like Donald Trump. Again, this is supposed to be in the 1980s, and most of it's supposed to take place in Washington, D.C. But then we have the problem in this movie, which is the plot. Now, the first half of the movie, the plot's actually fairly linear and fairly good. I actually was kind of invested in it early on, because basically there's this plot MacGuffin. And this MacGuffin is basically the equivalency of a monkey's paw, and even compare it to a monkey's paw. And this plot MacGuffin allows characters to make wishes, which is basically how Steve Trevor comes back into existence, except it's weird because it's Steve Trevor's soul inside somebody else's body. So he is operating out of another human being's body, and we see that early on. They do like a little kind of camera trick where the other guy who's the body he's inhabiting, who actually looks a bit like him, may have actually been his stunt double. We see him in an early shot, and then afterwards we find out that he's actually Steve Trevor. And then, of course, after all the sex is banged out, because that's another part of this movie, too. When Diana and Steve Trevor come back together, they do fuck, and it is kind of hilarious. They don't actually show it on screen. It is still a PG-13 movie, so I think they're trying to keep that semi-clean. But they do wake up in bed together, and there is pillow talk, so I would assume that intercourse was before that. But regardless, you do get to see kind of a bit of like the whole thing with the plot MacGuffin that really threw me off was after the halfway point in the film, the elements of it become zany, because what happens is Maxwell Lord makes the choice, which actually I got to credit them in terms of a plot choice for this, because this is how you break the game. This is exactly how you break the game, and it's the idea of he has the wishing thing. So he just wishes for the wishing thing to, instead of being a little rock that he can hold in his hand, to actually being him physically. And this is also where we have the biggest clusterfuck at the end of the movie, is directly because of this specific reason. So then he goes around basically kind of like I guess the devil, because I wouldn't say Jesus. Like, Jesus went around and granted prayers, I guess, but he goes around and grants any wish that rich people want and basically takes something in return from them. So the idea of a monkey's paw. So he's literally a living monkey's paw. And that is the most bizarre part about this movie, is that as these wishes start becoming more and more elaborate, the movie invents incredibly outrageous ways for them to take effect. So there's a point where this oil baron actually asks if he can have all the people, all of his lands returned to him, and have all the people that are living there currently get kicked out. And as soon as he says that, a massive 10-story high wall is erected around the entire area that is now his land. And then the people that are there are immediately told to leave, and the government just decides to give it to him. It is after that point is when things become extremely bizarre. And then the other thing that happens at the end of the movie, which again is what I said before, that hinges on that one small little detail. Maxwell Lord needs to actually be in physical contact with somebody in order to make the wish. So, and he can only make one of them per person. So basically, he's kind of like a luck vampire, I guess, something along those lines. So basically, he has to try and get as many people to wish as possible, and he'll just keep gaining power. And then we also have the linchpin, which is what comes in at the end of the movie, which is the fact that he has a small son, and he is apparently divorced. We never see the ex-wife. The kid appears to be Asian. It appears to be Asian, even though Pedro Pascal is Hispanic. So I just assume his ex-wife was Asian, or the kid's adopted. But now that's his little that's the little crutch that gets introduced, that kind of pops up every now and then in the storyline. The kid really doesn't do anything else. He's not really acting, I wouldn't say. He's just kind of there as a placeholder. He's basically more of an element to the plot as opposed to like an actual character. And then so that was enough about the kid, actually. But after you go through Pedro Pascal, after these wishes start getting granted and getting more and more grandiose, then the world starts going insane. People are going to nuke each other. There's riots in the streets for no fucking reason that's ever explained. The entire world goes to shit. for absolutely no discernible reason that we ever really see on screen. The only stuff we ever see is that he goes to the president, which I'm assuming is somebody that's supposed to be playing Reagan, but they don't actually say it's Reagan. And he asks for more nukes against the Russians, which again, that's just kind of hilarious to me. And that's really the only thing that they have on there. And then the Russians retaliate. But couldn't Pedro Pascal just go to somebody and say, "Oh yeah, the Russians are kind of cool with the nukes. They're all right. I wish that they're all right," or something like that. He could just kind of do that. I mean, again, you're kind of just digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. But the big difference here is that you can actually renounce your wish. So if you wish to regain the thing that you lost, then all you have to do is renounce your wish. And that's how the end of the plot is that that's how the villain of the movie is defeated, and because he really loved his son. And look, again, I'll say this. The acting is good. I like the acting in the film. I don't think there's... Gal Gadot has a few moments early on where she's a little stiff, but after you get Chris Pine in there, and they have their on-screen chemistry, it actually works a lot better. So she does a very good job. Kristen Wiig does a good job. Pedro Pascal does a good job. Our main characters are good. Like I said, we run into the main problems we have with the plot, and then we also run into more problems with the fight scenes. Now, here is something that some movies have and some movies don't. I think Patty Jenkins needs to get a different person for a fight coordinator, in terms of, or at least a fight choreographer. Some people that are going to be able to plan these scenes out and make them, more flary, let's put it that way, and less stupid. There is actually a scene in this where Steve Trevor launches a rocket-propelled grenade through the air. Diana takes her lasso of truth, hooks the RPG, and flies on the RPG up to where she is able to get on Maxwell Lord's car, and then flicks the RPG out so that it blows up somewhere and doesn't hurt anybody. That was a sequence in a movie, and it's just as dumb as you think it sounds. That is the moment that I actually pinpointed in my mind that this film jumped the shark, and I was not wrong. Because after that point, almost nothing in this fucking plot makes sense. Because the idea going into the final act is that Pedro Pascal needs to touch people in order to have their wishes. So he finds out that there's a secret fucking satellite system, just by chance, by the way. He happens to walk in on Reagan after he makes this little wish to Reagan, and it's just up on a billboard, or up on like a little board sitting behind him, like the diagram of it and everything with all the satellites. And he explains it like, oh, well, it touches everybody, and it's just kind of like a particle beam that like scans everything and interrupts, airwaves and stuff like that, broadcasting, which is not actually touching people. So he basically banks on the technicality that this thing will work, and it does work, which again, for no reason discernible, it works, because you're working with a magical artifact, so none of this makes any fucking sense. And then after you have the point where you have the whole renouncement of the wishes and all that shit, it's like, oh well, okay, so that actually sets up Diana's little arc in the film. So you have basically the beginning of the film, she wishes for Steve Trevor to come back. He comes back in the body of this guy, and then she has to renounce the wish, which means Steve Trevor now has to leave this man's body, and this man has to go on not knowing where he's been for like 3 or 4 days, and also that he's gotten laid. Again, it's a tad odd that she was contemplating actually keeping her dead boyfriend's soul inside another person's body. That is the creepy part to me. I feel like that getting Chris Pine back in the movie was a tad too thought out in this scenario, and again, a lot of it relies on the plot MacGuffin, which is the wishing stone. And now the other thing in the climax too is that the fight scene between Diana and Cheetah is not terrible. I don't think that's a bad fight scene. Although I think that a lot of that was enhanced with CGI, obviously, especially for the Cheetah suit. I will say this, by the way, when they actually do turn her into the physical interpretation of Cheetah, like the one where she's like half cat, they did a better job than the people that did the fucking Cats movie. Because that shit actually looked much, much better. It didn't look as stupid. And then, of course, by the end of the movie, she has to switch back. But the other thing I will say about this, too, outside of the action scenes, the costume department. Whoever was doing the costume department in this, somehow you made Kristen Wiig hotter than Gal Gadot. Now, Kristen Wiig is hot. I will give all of you that. Kristen Wiig is extremely hot. Gal Gadot is also extremely hot. But they do not give Gal Gadot any costumes in this movie, like any kind of like evening wear or anything like that. You know, I remember Batman v Superman. I think they gave her a few evening wear dresses. Justice League. There were some things too, if I remember correctly, in the first Wonder Woman. And in this, it's just like she's wearing suit pants for like 90% of the movie. I'm like, that's. It felt a little bit almost like, because the whole point of the movie is they're searching for artifacts. It felt a little bit like kind of Raiders of the Lost Ark Wonder Woman edition, which was very odd to me. Like I said, the whole second half of the movie, and more specifically the third act, falls apart from a plot point of view. It doesn't, like I said, the ratcheting up of the stakes are strange, and we don't know exactly how certain things have happened and why certain things are happening. Again, why people are rioting in the streets and burning cars, other than the fact it's the 80s. But like I said, none of this has to do with the year. I feel like the year had to have been chosen for some other incorporeal reason. It couldn't have been for anything related to the plot, because this plot could have existed at any point or time. But like I said, I wasn't really that high on the film going in. I basically got somewhat what I expected. If I was going to give this thing a rating, I would probably give it a 4 out of 10 stars. It's not that, like I said, plot falls apart over halfway through the movie. Not all the fight scenes are great. Some of them are stupid. Some of them are dumb. The ones at the later part of the film are at least good. The cost, if you're going in there and you're looking for a lot of Cheetah, it's probably more Maxwell Lord actually than Cheetah and Wonder Woman. He gets a lot of screen time in this. But if you're looking for that, I don't necessarily know if you're going to get that. You're going to need to get a lot of Pedro Pascal screaming about power. That's really what you're going to get for the most part. But like I said, that's kind of my review of things. I want to know what yours is. Have you seen Wonder Woman 1984? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you have anything specific to say about it? Put it in the comments below as usual. I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button. Subscribe. And remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?